Welcome all of you to the Advanced Network and the last in our series of events that we've called Access All Areas. My name is Surya Turner and I'm Director of Kuumba Youth Music, and I really want to welcome and thank you for coming today out of your what I know are very busy schedules, and thanking also our speakers in advance as well. I was thinking about this event and thinking about, well, how did we arrive here at the South Bank with all of you and all of our speakers? And I thought of Kuumba. Kuumba Youth Music is what I think of it as a tiny organisation with a big vision. And that is really to transform the life chances of black, minority, ethnic young people in this country, certainly in London. And we are a small organisation, and we started off in a very sort of organic way. We are sort of a classic sort of grassroots community network. And it began really with one violin teacher who happened to be black, and she lived in Bristol, but she was coming down to London at weekends and just teaching her relatives the violin. And then their friends began to hear about it, and she began to teach a few more. Then she got some of her friends, musicians, to teach other young people. So before you knew it, there was a kind of collection of young people walking down the street with violins and cellos and various other instruments. And people, you just used to kind of look. It was East London. It was a very diverse area. And people, where are you going? What are you doing? And gradually more and more young people got involved. And I was one of these sort of people. My son got introduced to the cello through his school, and his school were doing basically there was one of the first schools to do a wider opportunities program. In fact, the head teacher at that school, she privately fundraised to get all the young people playing string instruments. So my son one day brought home a cello. And I just thought, well, although I'm steeped in the arts, I wasn't sure how to support him. I could see he was interested. That was all I could see, was that he was interested, but what next? And then basically I took him along to the local music service and found there this network of other musicians who my son connected with. And there was just enough of these musicians to then basically form an ensemble one day. And there was an ensemble. We had a Christmas event, and we invited Omar Puente, who's a Cuban violinist, down to play with these musicians. And something happened that day, because I was watching these musicians. And they were there, and they somehow, with Omar playing on stage, it was almost like they rose to meet him. They kind of just grew in stature just watching Omar. And then Omar, one of the things he does, he plays a kind of medley. He'll kind of do his standard classics, and then he'll go into gospel, and then he'll go into, sort of Latin music. And he was doing that, and the audience responded to him in a way that I hadn't seen a classical audience responding. They were clapping, they were swaying, they were humming along, and they were just fully engaged. So you had the young people on stage fully engaged, and you had the audience engaged. And I thought, this is interesting. There's something here. So we formed it as an organisation, and received our first public funding in 2011. One of the things we've done, we've got various strands of activity, and one of them is actually having orchestral experiences in lovely spaces, in interesting venues. And that's been quite an interesting thing for us. The first time we came here to the South Bank Centre, our young musicians were quite overawed, and some of the parents. Some of the parents had never been here before. And it was almost like the space was it is huge, but it was kind of, do we belong here? That was a question that they were kind of, you could see somehow they were kind of experiencing. Do we actually belong here? But we came here several times. We had rehearsals here. We then had a concert here at the Claw Ballroom. And you could see the shift. They began from being, do we belong here? They began to feel like, actually, this is our space too. And one of the young musicians came up to me after the concert and said, Next time we perform here, let's all have dinner in the restaurant upstairs. And I was like, well, I've never had dinner in the restaurant upstairs. So it just, but I thought that was great because there was a real sense of ownership suddenly. So for us to actually, for our young musicians to perform in lovely spaces that inspire them, it means that they raise their own level of aspiration. So we do take them around, and last week we were at the HSBC, with the HSBC choir in St Alfred's Church in Greenwich. We performed on BBC London Live, lots of different spaces. Now, it's interesting because the ones who joined us on the journey from the beginning have done really very well, I would say. And many of them have won places at national children's orchestras. They've won places at schools through their music. We've had our first young musicians attending, winning scholarships at Senior Academy, Conservatoire. And because of the proliferation of wider opportunities programs, we're now attracting young musicians who are coming from much more challenging circumstances as well. And we realised that that some of those young people needed a different kind of support. And one of the things we do a lot of intensive holiday, sort of out of school hours events leading up to our big orchestral experiences. But we knew that these young people couldn't just join in and do some intensives and perform. We needed to give them much more regular support. So we kind of launched a Kuumba club, which is here. And it's really devised a fun environment, really, where they're getting skills each week and really getting to know the families, getting to know the parents in an informal environment so we can see what support they then need. So we've got our Kuumba Club, which was for young pre-graders to grade 4, and then also we've got a band of young musicians who are probably grade 5 plus. We recognise that this group's a very interesting group. They've got the potential, absolutely, and in order for them to get to that next level, again, they needed a different a sort of more support as well. So we established ensembles and quartets. And these have been working quite interestingly for us because we recognise that the young musicians actually are taking quite a lead on these kind of events. They're working with each other. The parents, I mean, we are a parent-led organisation, and the parents are planning rehearsals, and the young musicians are helping decide repertoire, and they're becoming quite popular. So this group here, they performed at a Google Science event last year, and we've got a number of other quartets. You may get to see one later on today. So we've got our sort of grade 5 plus, and then we recognise as a group who are on the cusp of deciding what they might do really for their futures. And they're probably, the average age of this group is probably 14 plus. What was interesting for me is that they're very proficient in their playing, actually. They're grade 7 plus, these young musicians. And yet they really lacked a confidence in themselves in some respects too. So we've kind of devised this programme, which is really combining personal development, coaching and musical skills. We kind of bring in the sort of, great coaches, very skilled coaches, but really sort of helping them to find a voice. What does it mean for them? Many of this group are coming up against their own identity. They're teenagers. They're like, why am I doing classical music? Why are my friends not doing it? Why are my friends not doing it? They'll be coming up against these kind of identity issues, and we thought, let's just give them a space away from their city environment, rural landscape, where they can actually spend some time really getting to know themselves and their musical abilities. So we've been really fortunate in our work with the partners that we've had. And one of our key partners has been the Royal Academy of Music. And it's quite interesting when people say, someone said to me recently, the Academy are doing very well in their outreach, aren't they? And I was thinking, that's interesting. I don't see it as outreach. I don't experience it as outreach. I experience it as partnership, as musical collaborations. They've been on a journey with us, and they've been learning with us in the way that, we've all been learning together. And their young musicians have been coming along to all our different events, or some of our different events, and experiencing quite different environments as well to perform. And it's been a great opportunity just to kind of share that process. Ford, the motor company as well. They've been working with us, and again, they've been learning about us, they've been learning about the musical landscape to figure out how they can support us more, and then we've gone in and performed at various events that they've had. So this whole thing about outreach, I thought, most interesting, partnership, this mutual collaboration and shared values that really make action happen. We've worked with a number of other organisations as well. Which brings us to the Advanced Network, which is why we're here today. So I said at the beginning that Kuumba Youth Music was a tiny organisation with a big vision. And it's a vision that is big, and we know that we can't just do this by ourselves. We can't transform the life chances of Black, Asian, minority young people by ourselves. It needs a collective, especially doing it through classical music training. So we actually had our first forum at the Royal Academy of Music 3 years ago, I think it was, Christina. And Christina just invited us down. She had done a network and invited a few colleagues around. I think Marshall was there. And then we thought, yeah, it's a good idea to do a little network. So we invited various people to talk. And what was interesting about that occasion, that we had parents and professionals in the room sharing their experiences, and it felt like that was the kind of first time that had happened. And many of the parents had musicians who actually were very gifted indeed. They were at Junior Conservatoire, so they were very much at the forefront, really. And yet their parents were saying, yes, we're putting all this effort into them playing their music, but we don't want them to be musicians. We don't actually want them to be professional musicians, or we're worried about that. And we thought that's a really big hurdle to get over. So it was great having that shared sort of experience. And so when youth music, and then basically me and Christina have been on this journey together from the Royal Academy of Music, and then I met Gary Crosby from Tomorrow's Warriors, and the three of us have been meeting and doing musical collaborations, getting to know each other. So when Youth Music launched their networking module, we thought, let's just open this conversation up. The conversation we've been having, let's open it up and invite more people. So we had our first event at the City Hall, and we had a theme of keys. So, it was we had to find the keys. What were the issues involved in diversity and excellence and progression? And we had an experience there because we had James Thomas, who's the leader of Hackney Music Service, and we had a young musician speaking about being a Black classical musician, James Douglas. They're both called James, senior James, younger James. And James Douglas, the musician, finished his story about what it was like being a young Black classical musician, and James Thomas turned to him and said, that's exactly my experience. You've just described my experience, which was 20 years ago. And it was at that point I thought, we'd want to have a different conversation in 20 years' time. We don't want to keep having the same conversation around why there's an underrepresentation in orchestras, why there's underrepresentation in conservatoires for Black minority ethnic students. Let's move the conversation on, which is what we're trying to do here. So our second event was at the Royal Academy of Music, and we called that Unlocking the Doors. So we knew what some of the issues were now from our first event as to why there was underrepresentation, and the Unlocking the Doors was, okay, what are we going to do about it? What are we as leaders of organisations, what are we as musicians going to do about this? And we used action learning as a methodology, and action learning is a great method to actually take ownership, really, that everybody there gathered can actually do one thing, something to create change, and we looked at that method. And we also, alongside the events, we've been doing some research with Beverly Mason has been doing, she might say a little bit about that later, and some of you have been involved in the focus groups that we've been having. And then that brings us very neatly on to today. And I'm going to hand over to Hilary, because Hilary will explain what we're doing today. I'm just looking forward to hearing our speakers, hearing your contributions about this theme, and moving the conversation forward. So thank you very much.